welcome to episode 2 of Well That Happened. I am Saskia, the Assistant Editor of Voice, and I am joined by our Kickstart team, Amy, Dulcie, Jay, Hamish, and Ash. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, how are you all doing today?
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
Interested about the particular things we're talking about this week.
Yes, we are ready to tackle some more crazy news from this week. So last week we spoke about Banksy's artwork being defaced, and I'm sure Ash doesn't want me to use that word, but there we go. We spoke about the ridiculousness that was I Stand with Joan Smith, and we also spoke about OnlyFans and the banning of adult content, which, might I add, has been put on hold. So everybody, give yourself a pat on the back because we single-handedly gave people back their livelihoods with this one video. So this week we're going to talk about the Nirvana baby, Boris Johnson's attack on Universal Credit, and the Extinction Rebellion. So Spencer Elden, the Nirvana baby, suing Nirvana for child sexual exploitation because of his baby stuff being on the cover of the album. Let's go with Jay. What do you think about this?
Well, I think the idea of suing for, I don't think he got paid all that much, and I'm like it was a pretty famous album and you kind of got the short end of the stick there, so maybe suing to get paid more might have been an idea, but suing for child pornography is really messed up.
There we go. Yes. Amy, your thoughts on this?
It's a little bit ridiculous because he's been completely 1000% okay with it and even really enjoyed it for 30 years. And now in the last couple of months, it's oh no, actually, I'm not okay with that. And I just wonder what's going to happen to the album if it is classed as that, because obviously millions of people own it. Mm-hmm. Do we all have to burn them? Is that what we have to do?
Like a public burning, and recorded on social media, just fires around the world. Yeah, that's a good point. What is going to happen to the album? Are they going to recall it? It'd be a bit ridiculous, but Ash, I can see you stewing away over there.
Yeah, it's just it's crazy because it's obviously, like you guys said, it's such a big album, and it is one of those things. It's everyone has already seen the image, so taking it away will not really change anything. And the fact that Amy said, he's kind of been using that to his advantage for the past 30 years anyway. I mean, he had a Rolling Stone cover article where he did the image for that. He's also did another one when he was 10 years old. Constantly, I'm sure he's getting paid for these appearances as well. It's not like he's not getting money for doing this. It's kind of become his identity almost. I mean, you see the pictures of him. He's got Nevermind tattooed across his chest. Some might say, oh, it's just he's been conditioned this way because it's all he's known. But if someone really hated something that much, I don't think that they would lean into it as much as what he has. But yeah, it's quite ridiculous, and yeah, I feel like it's just a way for him to try and grab that bag, really. And yeah, it's kind of abusing someone else's creation to try and get that, especially one that's really well loved, as Nevermind is as an album.
And as a baby, that, he's very generic. That could have literally been any baby. He could have moved away from that, and gone about his normal life. He didn't have to get the tattoo. He didn't have to recreate it as many times as he did. If he really had an issue with it, he could have just been that's a little secret that I have to myself, that I'm that baby. But like Ash said, he's obviously chasing the bag. Dulcie, any thoughts?
It's on a matter of principle, I want to support him because I do think people should be allowed to realize later in life that they were uncomfortable with something that they might have gone out 30 years or whatever and not realize that this is something that was genuinely upsetting to them, because that happens all the time. People do realize that they've been abused or something much later in life, and I do think it's it is a matter of consent, and he wasn't able to give consent. I do think that comes into it. But I think the part that just made me not support him is like, he's, as well as suing Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic and everyone like that, he's also suing Courtney Love. And I think there's a lot of things that you can drag Courtney Love into, but this probably isn't one of them. Like, that feels a bit like it's not for the sake of the sort of his own feeling discomfort about it. That makes me feel like it's more about money. And he should have been paid for more, but it's using, like Jay said, using that term child pornography. It's very strong. I do think we're a bit precious about nudity in the Western world as well. That nudity doesn't inherently have to be sexual, but at the same time, that makes me support him again, because I'm like, we do live in a world that sees nudity as inherently sexual. So if he wants to be uncomfortable about being seen nude, then he's allowed to be. But yeah, it's an odd one.
I mean, I can understand being uncomfortable in the whole consent thing, but then why not sue your parents or guardians? Because they were the ones at the time who, you know, signed the check or took the money that they accepted the first time. Yeah, I wouldn't be mad at Nirvana. I'd be mad at my mom if that was me as that baby on the cover of like a massive album. I'd be fuming. Hamish, what do you think?
I'm sort of almost veering towards mixed, but also I think because he has brought, like, you know, oh, it's child pornography into it, and he's suing like all these people who maybe aren't really the ones to sue. I think if he was aiming directly at the record company, I'd almost be like, yeah, fair, just chase as much money as you can out of it, because I mean, that's, you know, don't we all? But yeah, I think just he sort of muddied the waters too much with like the way he's talked about how it's affected him in terms of considering it that. But then there is also like his lawyers come out and said he's had like years in therapy to talk it through. So part of me has that sort of like holdback of, well, I don't actually know him or what he's felt genuinely. So maybe there are genuine stuff, or maybe there aren't. I know which one I veer towards. I instinctively think, yeah, he's just recreating the album cover in terms of chasing that dollar, you know. But otherwise, it could genuinely be like a deep-seated, this has impacted me, or it could be maybe even he's just had something out with this where he's feeling, you know, I don't really like where my career has gone. I can blame it on this thing. Like it's so hard. Like you just don't know a person, you know.
Yeah. No, but it is true. You don't ever really know what's going on inside somebody's, you know, like head and stuff. But it does all, I think maybe we're all too cynical. Maybe we're all too like, everything is just done as a publicity stunt, or people who've been forgotten about, they want a piece of that like new age fame, and it's just, we see it all the time. So maybe we are too cynical. Maybe he is genuinely, I don't want to say disturbed by this, but traumatized, hurt, whatever. But then again, we won't know because we are not Spencer Elden. So next, Boris Johnson's attack on Universal Credit. Dulcie, I'm gonna just come straight to you because I know that you have a lot to say about this.
I mean, it's awful for so many reasons. It's especially it coming in September as well. I think right before autumn and then eventually winter is terrible, because that's when people are going to need even more money for their electricity and heating and gas bills and everything like that. And I think that sort of Boris Johnson has been deflecting from it by saying that employment numbers have risen, but we're all here because of a Kickstart scheme, which essentially we're employed now. But it's Kickstart contracts are only for a limited amount of time, and at the end of it, we're going to be back onto universal credit. Maybe we don't have another job secured, and I think it's kind of, it feels like a quick fix of saying employment is rising without addressing any of the real issues. And I think as well, it's just all part of their they want to like pretend that the pandemic isn't happening anymore, but it is. And you can't just like cut the funding that was introduced because of the pandemic. It like people are suffering from long COVID, and that's why they're claiming universal credit and stuff like that. Lots of people claiming universal credit are people on low income jobs, people who are actually employed, and it's, yeah, I'm not happy about it.
I was saying earlier how I feel Boris Johnson has this really warped view of people on benefits, like a early 2000s view, you know, where anyone on benefits was just lazy and just the scum of the earth. It wasn't true then. It's not true now. And like you said, there are people who are employed, but they have like low income jobs, so they just need that little extra to help them get along. And for him to turn around and just, oh yeah, the pandemic's over now, I'm going to cut that, you guys can all go fend for yourselves because employment numbers are up, like, it's ridiculous to say the least. And I mean, if your own party are turning against you and they're not agreeing with you on this, that says a lot. So he's very stuck in his ways. Amy, do you have any thoughts on this?
Coming from a personal point of view, I graduated university with an illustration degree, which obviously doesn't translate to a readily available job very easily. So universal credit, Kickstart, all those things have been absolutely fantastic for me. They've opened so many doors and given me so many more opportunities, and basically paid my rent for quite a long time, which I wouldn't have been able to do straight out of university because of the pandemic. And I really agree with Dulcie that they're picking and choosing little battles to fight instead of focusing on the fact that the pandemic is still happening and these things are still needed. And no matter how positive an impact they've had in this little snapshot of time, it's not fixed, it's still happening. So,
absolutely. And if they really didn't believe that, then why would you guys even be here? Why would there be a need for a Kickstart scheme, you know? Hamish, thoughts?
It's just classic Tory, isn't it? I mean, that's why I was so like surprised when even his own party were sort of going against it. It's like, wow, he's pushed the boat out even too far for them. Because he's always going to do, like, their whole thing is, right, we'll push what's acceptable, and if we don't get a big reaction, then we'll keep that, and then we'll push it even further. You know, it's classic tactics, and the whole justifying it with a rise in employment, it's a tried and true method. Like, the most efficient way to raise employment is to just not have jobs that can support someone, living on their own, which I'm sure he may have generated a lot of, but that doesn't really eliminate the need for UC, as everyone said so far. A lot of people will have low income jobs where they need UC to boost up. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping it gets backtracked, but I wouldn't be too surprised if it doesn't. Based on history,
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. The universal credit was like, there's just always been so many problems around it, like from its inception, and so I wouldn't be surprised if this sadly goes through. Jay?
I think universal credit is one of those systems in like the UK where it's just made to be as impossible and shameful to use as possible. It's just made to be so hard to like push yourself through as you're like run around and messed around and have to fill through a million things that might not be easy for you to do. And then to like cut it, I was like, again, I'm not even surprised anymore. I am very cynical. But yeah, I was surprised to hear other Tories be like, "Oh, maybe we don't." I was like, "What?"
Something's in the water.
Yeah.
Ash?
Yeah, well, he said like he wants to basically start to get people out, like through this universal credit thing. He wants to get a more jobs-led recovery, I think was his way of putting it, out of the pandemic, rather than coming out of the pockets of taxpayers, which just seems awful to me, because like everyone's been saying, the majority of these people that are taking universal credit are working, whether it be part-time or and that's all that they're able to, because it's been so hard for a lot of people, including myself, to find these kind of jobs. And I feel like there's a sense of almost, it's a classic political, like, conservative way of thinking, of keeping the poor hungry so that they work harder. And I feel like it's becoming more and more apparent in the politics of this country, almost echoing that of the US. And it's something that I feel like a lot of people our age know that needs change. And even like the Tory ministers that are supposed to be backing Boris Johnson are also agreeing, like, especially since the pandemic and with the rise in food prices and like the shortages that are happening, you know, it is keeping people hungry, because, like, you know, taking away this money is taking away someone's livelihood. It's taking away the ability to look after their families if they have them, or just even look after themselves and pay for their own way. I feel like there's going to be a big repercussion for, if this does go through, for people like us and just young people in general. I feel like the way that the politics has gone over the past couple of years has really been detrimental to our progression in our careers. I mean, the pandemic was the biggest setback that I feel like a lot of us have had to face, and then to come out of that and have even more setbacks in the future that we're going to have to deal with is just, I suppose it just seems unfair, especially when you know that these decisions are so out of your hands and have been made by people who aren't in your position and don't really care about your position either. That's the consensus that I got. So yeah, I'm not happy with it, as I'm sure a lot of people aren't, but like I say, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes through. I mean, you see all these bills that have been passed, especially with the protest one that we'll be obviously looking at in a sec. But it's just, yeah, the world seems to be turning into a dark place for young people, and yeah, I'm hoping that there's going to be some kind of fight against it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even the whole, it shouldn't be coming out of taxpayers' pockets, like, taking that angle was ridiculous, because the pandemic certainly humbled everyone. Like, it wasn't just working class people who were affected, it was everybody up and down, every whatever, like the whole spectrum. People, their lives were just completely turned upside down. I don't think if you spoke to taxpayers that they would even begrudge this, keeping this increase that they did, like, from people who need it. I think Boris Johnson is just, he lives in a whole other world, doesn't he? He's not really on any of our wavelengths. He's not on this planet. Well, we could talk about Boris Johnson's ridiculous way of thinking all day. But let's move on to, sadly, not something more cheerier, something more cheery. Extinction Rebellion protests, the police bill. It's all turning to, I really want to say the S word, but I won't. It's all turning bad. So, Hamish, can you talk to us a little bit about the Extinction Rebellion? Because you have written an article on it, and you are the voice authority.
That's very generous to say as an authority on it, but the Extinction Rebellion. So they've done this before. So right now, what's happening is they've got a planned lot of 2 weeks of protests in London, mostly City of London, Financial District area. I think they are branching out as well. And they've done this sort of thing before. I think it was either 2019 or 2017, one of those years. I know.
I'm regretting calling you the authority on it.
I mean, 2 years of however many years have been on the planet. Like,
yeah,
it's pretty specific. So they've taken London to a standstill before, and this time they've had, I mean, tens of thousands of people so far participating in it. So it's quite like it's one of the biggest protests we've had for a long time, and especially because it's this extended period of time as well, it's even more remarkable. But Extinction Rebellion, they've always had a history, and a lot of negative press gets associated with them because a lot of the time it's very flashy and dramatic things they do. So, for example, they've been painting buildings red. They've built a massive table on a street. They've glued each other's hands together, and people always go, "Well, that's sort of attention seeking. That's this, you know," and it's pushing people away from protesting against climate change. But I sort of have the opinion that if you can do a very like non-disruptive protest that doesn't have any flashiness with it whatsoever, great, but no one's going to listen to you. Like, we've had however many years of knowing what's happening to the world, and in those amount of years, nothing really significant has been done.
I just think it doesn't matter how flashy or how quiet you are. If you're protesting something, they're going to have an issue with it. Like, you know, the Black Lives Matter protests, they weren't as dramatic, like, or theatrical as the Extinction Rebellion, but they still got a bunch of crap from it. Like, you know, I just don't think it matters. I think you're protesting something that the government doesn't care about, they don't want to listen to, you're going to come under fire. Like, the whole painting the fountain red was the Animal Rebellion, not the Extinction Rebellion. But in all the headlines, they've kind of just lumped them all together because it's another cause that they don't really care about. So they're not bothered about the facts. It's just these people are causing a nuisance. People are listening and we don't like that. So we're gonna, yeah, they'll see.
I'm quite conflicted about Extinction Rebellion because I align with everything that they talk about and everything that they want to do, and I really support disruptive protest. But I find that in my personal experience, a lot of their protests have affected like the rest of the normal population more so than they ever affect the government. They don't seem to be disrupting the government's day all that much. Like, for instance, when I lived in Cardiff, they did a really big cycle through the whole city, and all these cars were stuck behind them, and which just created more pollution as well because all these cars were congested. But and I just feel like one of their things is they want a communal. They want everyone to bond together to fight this, but because lots of their protests seem to disrupt ordinary people more than the government, I do think it's like people who disagree with me often say they're turning potential supporters against them, but I do kind of think that they maybe are, like, and it's such a shame because I really want to support everything they do. I do think it's interesting though that, I mean, hang on, how have the police, does anyone know how the police have reacted to this? Have they arrested anyone?
There's been about 200 arrests so
yeah,
far.
over 4
Okay.
days.
I read that
Right.
they did one march to try it as like a decoy to try and get the police away, and then they built the structure that Hamish was talking about, and then the police ended up like arriving at that as well and made some arrests there as well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be like not necessarily violence, but yeah, it was like people who had super glued their hands together and such, and like were getting their hands forced apart and stuff like that. That was probably the extent of the damage.
Because I know in the past they'd been accused of being too complicit with the police. So I was wondering how it was now in light of the recent bill. Yeah, because I want everyone to protest as much as possible in the face of that bill because I think that's horrid. But yeah, sorry, I don't. I kind of just laid into Extinction Rebellion. Then it's more a matter of personal taste. But I'm really glad that there is a mass movement for climate change. Activism and stuff like that.
No, I guess it is difficult because, like Hamish said, the more in your face, like in people's face you are, the more attention you're gonna get. But then I'm thinking about, they dumped like tons of rubbish, didn't they, like in the street, or something like that. And I'm just thinking about the people who are gonna have to clean that up, because it's not gonna be Boris and his crew. It's gonna be like everyday street cleaners and stuff. So it is hard to blindly support them, but I also kind of get it. Oh, I don't know. Jay, you tell me what you think.
I think the problem is we can't reach like Boris and his gang. You know, like we can't all be Guy Fawkes here. Like we can't get close enough without being arrested. We can't disrupt their lives as much as we want to, because they'd just be arrested, and it, like, you can't even guarantee that they wouldn't just cover it up too, so no one else gets more ideas in some kind of public safety thing. But like the thing is with, you know, then they do put pressure on the government, and like it sucks to have to kind of screw over other people to do so, but like, you know, those bin men have to be paid, and that is more money that the Tories don't want to give out. You know, those people in traffic might have to be compensated, or that's something that they have to deal with, you know. And like, yeah, it would be really nice to have like protests that could just be, you know, going to Downing Street and like ruining them, you know, like, but we just like, we can't, you know. Like I want to grab a massive bag of rubbish and throw it all over Downing Street, but like I wouldn't get there, you know. I'd just get arrested.
No, that is a good point. I don't know where I land on this. I'm listening to all of you and I'm just silently here like, let me just say your thing to each other. Amy, what do you think?
I kind of agree with everyone, which is such a middleman thing to say.
It is, but that's how I feel as well. Like, yeah, good point. Oh no, you good point too.
I agree with Dulcie that it is quite exclusionary how it really does inconvenience normal people more than the people it matters. But I also agree with Hamish that it needs to be flamboyant, it needs to be in your face, because otherwise no one's going to talk about it, especially with things to do with climate change and things like that. That tends to get swept under the rug and put aside for the next generation and the next generation, whereas it needs to be sorted by us. I don't really know where to stand on it, because I also agree with Jay that it's, as much as everyone banding together and making as much noise as possible, it always feels like we're never going to touch the people that we really need to. So yeah, it's a complex situation.
Yeah, definitely multifaceted. Ash, what do you think?
All I'll say is it is commendable that Extinction Rebellion is probably one of the more well-known movements for this kind of thing globally, you know, not just in the UK. I saw that those protests that happened yesterday, they also happened in Brazil for the Amazon rainforest. They seem to be quite cohesive with their planning, I suppose, and the structure of their protests, which is more than can be said for maybe other protests, such as, like, you know, when you see vegan protests outside of butcher shops or whatever. It seems a lot more like planned, and there's like some kind of infrastructure behind what they're doing, because there's so many people that are involved with it. And I feel like that within itself like shows that these kind of situations, although yeah, they do bring up these talking points of, you know, just how good is it to have these protests, like how much does it affect the public. But you know, without these people doing these things, no, you know, it wouldn't exist and no one would be talking about it. So at least it's bringing this conversation to light. And you know, we might not see protests like this in the future, depending on what goes on with these bills. And or if, I mean, maybe it'll get worse if people protest harder. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's just good to see that, you know, people are still standing for what they believe in a time where it feels like everyone seems to be getting pushed down for what they believe in. And yeah, it's that's basically my 2 cents on it all. Is I do agree with the fact that yeah, it does inconvenience a lot of people. It, you know, maybe it could be done sometimes. You're obviously going to get protesters that are just there for the fun of it and just want to cause a little bit of anarchy and stuff, but the overarching like planning of these kind of things, you know, even the idea of having the decoy and then building the structure, and they'd obviously thought about it enough through to make some kind of statement, and they did. You know, people are talking about it, and I suppose that's what they want. At the end of the day, it's just whether that conversation manages to keep on going, you know, over the next couple of months, and what Extinction Rebellion plan on doing next.
I think the bottom line is, Boris and co, if you don't like it, do something about it yourselves, something actually meaningful and worthwhile, and something that is not going to see us having to watch Jeff Bezos and co fly up into space while we're all down here burning. So,
and if we don't like what they've got planned, then I'm sure they'll hear about it.
Exactly. It's a democracy after all.
I wouldn't mind coming up about just with the rubbish thing. Do you mind if I
Go
a little
for
bit
it.
about that? I just sort of like that, sort of like a microcosm of this idea of like, if you're doing a protest or if you're doing a movement, you need to be perfect. You can't have any little hiccups, otherwise people can sort of bring that about and then latch onto that as like, well, this is why. And I know why people talk about it for Extinction Rebellion, because they're all about anti-pollution and they're littering, which is terrible. But the amount of litter they've generated, like, it's comparable to, say, and this is over like several amount of days, it's comparable to like one day of like Hogmanay celebration in Edinburgh or something. And I'm sure people would clean up after themselves, but it's hard to with police arresting you for being there. And like, yeah, and I get why it is. And of course, like, there is genuine, I get people's grievances of like they're disrupting normal people. But well, like, say if every CEO, like finance guy and politician had like a football game every Friday, sure, like that would be great to be able to disrupt that. But like, there isn't, as Jay was saying, it's so hard to just restrict yourselves to certain buildings when you've got these thousands of people and when, you know, these areas are restricted. But it is like, and I obviously, you sort of get the impression that like people say, well, it's fine to disrupt normal people. You sort of get the impression, well, yeah, but you're not the one being disrupted. You know, I've never been. Is screwed over an okay thing to say? I don't know if that counts as a swear word. I've never been screwed over by an Extinction Rebellion march. So like, yeah, I get why it's easy to say, but like that's just my instinct. I know maybe that's wrong, but like that's, I don't know. Like again, that was my additional 2 cents.
So that's it for today's episode of Well That Happened. Thank you everybody for watching. And once again, I will not subject myself to telling you to like and subscribe. The next screen will do that for you. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Well That Happened will be posted on our YouTube channel every Saturday morning. So thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.